On a quiet morning in Atlanta, John Garrity is an ordinary guy trying to hold a life together. A messy divorce with his wife Allison, and their young son Nathan at the center of everything. John's not a superhero, he's a regular dad who works hard and worries a lot, which makes him the kind of guy you root for because when the world goes sideways, he's the one who keeps trying. That ordinary life gets yanked out from under him fast when scientists announce a comet on a collision course with Earth, and policymakers tell everyone to brace for the worst. It sounds like the setup for a disaster movie because, well, it is, and Greenland plays it straight. Humans against an extinction-level event with bureaucracy, selfishness, and small acts of courage in between. At first, it's almost eerily calm. We get the slow-build tension of news feeds and official briefings. This is not some distant sci-fi threat. It's happening now. Little chunks break off the comet, called Clark, and start raining toward Earth. Satellite images, expert panels, and the Pentagon trying to stay calm give you the sense that the professionals have answers, but the public doesn't. That gap between what people know and how they act is where the movie lives. John's family, like millions of others, has to decide whether to trust the system or trust their own legs. Then the government starts assigning evacuation tickets. Not everyone makes the list. The ethics of who gets saved is a background howl that never fully goes quiet. For John, the universe gives him one of those coveted tickets. A chance for a place on a military aircraft bound for Greenland, where the plan is to shelter a handful of people in underground bunkers long enough for the comet fragments to pass. It's a lottery of survival that feels obscene and arbitrarily cruel. Allison and Nathan are eligible. And suddenly the family's fractured relationships become urgent in ways they never were in marriage counseling. Allison's initial anger at John, the residue of their breakup, turns into tense cooperation. They have to figure out how to be parents together under emergency conditions. John's flaws show up, sure. What follows is a road trip disguised as an apocalypse. The film shifts gears into a kinetic, sometimes terrifying journey where roads are clogged with the panicked and the desperate, and normal social contracts collapse. Gas stations become flashpoints. Convoys of cars and buses move at a crawl. Rumors and violence spread faster than the official information channels. There's a sequence where John and Allison and Nathan try to make their way to a military pickup point, and it's basically a microcosm of every human impulse under stress. Generosity, cowardice, theft, and the occasional weird, heroic moment you wouldn't expect from the person next door. Along the way, they bump into other survivors who complicate the moral landscape. Some people try to help, others try to take advantage. John's encounter with a neighbor named Dale is a standout. A man who, when panic hits, chooses personal survival over decency and steals a seat on a plane that John and his family need. It's an ugly but plausible choice that sets off a chase and forces John to confront what he's willing to do to keep his kids safe. That sequence is tense because it's not an epic battle scene. It's a personal, ugly fight for something that could mean life or death. The theft of the ticket is a small, cruel human drama against the backdrop of planetary doom. And the film uses that contrast to keep things grounded. Military checkpoints add another layer. The armed forces are doing triage on a society in free fall. They're trying to keep order, but they're also overwhelmed and sometimes brutal.
There's a sense that the government is acting with what information it has, but the film never lets you believe that institutions have this fully under control. Planes, designated airports, priority lists, they all exist, but they are messy and fallible. There are scenes where the characters wait in lines that never move, or where an evacuation goes sideways because the military can't secure a route. Those moments are stressful and feel frighteningly possible. As John and Allison navigate the chaos, we get small, humanizing scenes, a dad calming his son, a couple arguing about whether to let pride or practicality lead, strangers helping one another out of simple kindness. Those moments are the emotional glue. They remind you why these characters matter beyond being pieces on a doomsday chessboard. There are also quieter beats where you see the weight of possible loss. Allison thinking about the life she won't get to have if things go bad, John thinking about his failures as a husband and a father. It's not just big explosions, it's the micro-choices that tell you who these people are. When they finally get to a staging area and onto an aircraft, the film switches to high-stakes survival mode. The military's grand plan is both impressive and terrifying: shuttle people to Greenland, where underground shelters will hopefully protect a slice of humanity. But the journey is chaotic. Evacuation flights, fuel priorities, and the sheer logistical nightmares of moving tens of thousands of people mean the system is fragile. The film does a good job of making the viewer feel that fragility, planes are scarce, seating is shorthand for who wins and who loses. And of course, tragedy and heroism happen in the cramped corridors of those transport planes too. The scenes set in Greenland itself are where the movie leans into both spectacle and intimacy. The bunkers are claustrophobic and carefully managed. Protocols, registries, and assigned acreage of survival are laid out with bureaucratic precision. You feel this strange mixture of safety and constraint. Yes, you're away from the falling sky, but life in a bunker is rigid, rationed, and full of tension. People who were strangers before are now your neighbors for the foreseeable future, and all the petty human stuff, jealousy, power plays, grief, doesn't disappear when you go underground. In fact, it intensifies because there's nowhere to escape. The movie keeps its focus mostly on the family unit, and that's smart. Disaster movies sometimes balloon into sprawling ensembles and lose emotional focus. Greenland keeps its core tight. John remains the center, a father who does stupid but brave things, who makes mistakes and pays for them, who also manages an act or two of real courage. Allison is practical and fierce when she needs to be. She's not a damsel or a cheery sidekick. Nathan, small and bewildered, is the human reason the parents can't give up. The relationship between John and Allison evolves as they face the collapse. Old wounds get reopened, but necessity and a shared love forces them to cooperate. The film doesn't do an elaborate beyond-the-end reconciliation. Instead, it shows two adults who muck through a catastrophic situation, imperfectly. The stakes keep climbing because the comet isn't a single event, it's multiple impacts and secondary effects. There are fragments that hit cities and cause tsunamis, earthquakes, atmospheric fallout, the classic cascading disasters. Greenland's special effects do the job without becoming gaudy. You feel the heat and the shockwaves, the way infrastructure fails. The movie smartly intercuts global destruction with the claustrophobic reality inside the shelters, so you never lose sight of what's at stake. And it's worth noting how the filmmakers use sound and silence to sell the scenes. Sometimes a sudden quiet makes the aftermath hit harder than another explosion could. There are moments of real sacrifice that make the film hit home. People in leadership roles, both military and civil, have to make choices that cost lives. The film refuses to be purely sentimental, it acknowledges that sometimes the right decision is morally fraught. Without spoiling every twist, there are scenes where characters we've gotten to know choose to do things that put them in danger to save others. Those beats are effective because you've been with these characters enough to care. The movie balances spectacle and human stakes by making sure that explosions always have someone's face in front of them. Humor appears in unexpected spots, mostly in the form of dark, human moments, banter between evacuees, a weary soldier cracking a half-joke, John's awkward attempts at fatherly advice that land with a thud. Those bits are small but valuable, they make the characters feel alive and not just like survivors on a checklist. There's also an underlying sadness threaded through the whole thing, a sense of mourning for the world that's being lost and for the normal future the characters once expected. The movie also doesn't shy away from the political and ethical questions. Who gets saved? Who decides? The lottery and priority lists are facades of fairness that hide a brutal calculus. You can walk away from Greenland annoyed or angry at the system the film depicts, and that's probably the point. It's a portrait of how institutions try to manage the unmanageable, often failing to account for the full human cost. The film's moral center isn't a grand ideology, it's the small, stubborn determination of one family to stay together, and the occasional kindness of strangers that proves essential. As the comet's final acts unfold, the tension ratchets up to a gutting finale. The filmmakers deliver a sequence where survival and hope are finally in sight, but the cost is apparent. There's a bittersweet note, some characters make it, others don't, and those losses matter because the movie took the time to make them matter. In the closing moments, John, Allison, and Nathan find themselves in a fragile sanctuary, looking out at a world remade by catastrophe. It's not a cinematic promise that everything will be fine, it's a quiet vow that as long as people keep trying, there's a sliver of something worth living for. Ultimately, Greenland is most effective when it keeps its focus on family amid calamity. It's less about global strategy and more about the small decisions that define us under stress. Gerard Butler's John is flawed and likable. Marina Baccarin's Allison is pragmatic and strong. Their son Nathan is the emotional anchor. The disaster spectacle is well executed but never overshadows the human story. The film asks you to think about what you'd do in that situation, and then answers with messy, believable choices. There's a lot to chew on in Greenland, the ethics of survival, the kindnesses and cruelties of strangers, and the ugly reality that institutions can't save everyone. But on the simplest level, it's the story of a dad who refuses to give up on his kid and a family who stitches itself back together amid global ruin. It's tense, occasionally ruthless, and occasionally tender, and if you like disaster movies that keep their feet on the ground emotionally while still delivering spectacle, Greenland delivers. And hey, if you watch carefully, you might find yourself cheering for the small, stubborn acts of decency more than the fireworks, which, in the end, feels like the point.